I don't speak Farsi, but I read Farsi. So you can laugh when I now say something in Farsi. Hamd bihad un Khuda pak ra, un ki iman dad mushti e khak ra. First of all, I want to tell you how I met the works of Attar, Rumi, Sadi, and all the other Sufi poets translated by Baron Ekerwald.
اول میخوام براتون توضیح بدم که من چطور با شعر عطار، مولوی، سعدی و بقیه شاعرای صوفی که آثارشون به قلم بارون هرملی به سوئدی ترجمه شده آشنا شدم.
My father was a forester. We lived in the province of Jämtland, 63rd latitude, near the border upon Norway. When I was 10, I was sent to the high school in the city. My best friend Arne was the son of a well-known merchant in the branch of tinned food. They had their own villa, the business flourished, there were no assistants. Arne's father ran the firm alone. But suddenly he became addicted to alcohol. He lay on his bed reading poetry and drinking hard liquor. Goods were not delivered, invoices not paid, clients complained. Arne's mother told them her husband had fallen ill. For how long? She couldn't tell. When people called, she had to shut the door to the room where the intoxicated merchant lay singing folk songs. He had a fine baritone. The family lived in a chaos.
پدر بنده مأمور جنگلبانی بود و در ناحیه روستایی در ایالت جنتلند در حوالی نروژ زندگی می‌کردیم. 10 سالم که بود منو فرستادن دبیرستان در شهر. یکی از دوستان نزدیک من اسمش آرنه بود. پدر آرنه یک تاجر غذاهای کنسرو شده بود که توی شهر برای خودشون ویلایی داشتن. بعضیشون خیلی خوب بود. پدر آرنه کارمندی نداشت و تمام شرکت رو به تنهایی اداره می‌کرد. پدر آرنه معتاد شد، شروع کرد به خوندن شعر و استفاده بیش از حد الکل. کم کم مشتریا و تمام افرادی که با پدر آرنه در ارتباط بودن شروع کردن به سوال پرسیدن که خب این آقا کی میاد سر کارش. مادر آرنه میگفت مریضه، ولی خب تا چند وقت مریضه؟ جوابی نداشتن بدن. برای همین زن بیچاره شوهرش رو از انظار عمومی غایب میکرد که شوهرش هم نشسته بود اونجا هی الکل مصرف میکرد و شعر میخوند و کلا خانواده‌شون خیلی گرفتار شده بود.
The drunkard's wife went to a priest and asked for advice. I knew him. His name was Reverend Rustborn. He asked if her husband had any interest beside the bottle. She said poetry. The priest advised her to lend the Mesnavi by Maulana Rumi, translated by Ekerwald. His translations were to be borrowed at the library in the city. There are stronger things than brandy, said the priest. And what a wonder! The merchant read Rumi's Mesnavi, finished his drink, became sober, and the business began to flourish anew.
زن آقای الکلی رفت پیش کشیش محل و از اون تقاضای کمک کرد. من این کشیش رو میشناختم. اسمش راسبورن بود. کشیش از خانم پرسید آیا شوهر شما غیر از الکل علاقه دیگه‌ای هم داره؟ خانم هم گفت بله، شعر هم میخونه. کشیش گفت خیلی خوب، مثنوی مولانا رو بهش بدید بخونه. مطمئن باشید از هر مشروبی قوی تره. عجبا که این آقای بازرگان مثنوی مولوی را خواند و مشروب را کنار گذاشت. دوباره تبدیل شد به یک آدم متین و موقر و برگشت سر زندگیش و دوباره کاسبیش رونق گرفت.
I was then 16 years old. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche were my favorites. I read them in German language, but what my friend Arne had told me about his father and poetry that was stronger than brandy brought me to the library, and I borrowed Kalila and Tazkiratul Awliya. That was in May 1940. Since then, I have every day read these Sufi poets, and I am the owner of all Hermelin's translations. In the 40s, they were inexpensive. Today, they are precious. For a volume of Attar's Tazkiratul Awliya, you have to pay almost 100 euro. I wrote letters to Hermelin. He still lived in Lund. He died 1944. I wanted to thank him for this gold mine he opened for me, but I dared not send him. In my eyes, he was too high and I too small.
من موقع 16 سالم بود. دو تا از نویسندگانی که خیلی بهشون علاقه داشتم، نیچه و شوپنهاور.
Sometimes I wondered how faithful he translated this poetry. That was the reason I began to study Farsi in 1975. I had begun to make a collection for an anthology. The title was Persian Anthology. It was published in 1976 with my introductions. I visited Iran 1971. We went by car. My wife and two children went with me. I wanted to visit the tombs of the saints. We passed Konya in Turkey and found the Tekke of Maulana. I have been there 2 times. We went to Hamadan looking for the tomb of Baba Tahir Oriyan. We wanted to visit the tomb of Sadi in Shiraz, but it was in the summer, the heat became unbearable. We came to Isfahan. We knew that we were in the city where Ibn Sina had lived for 14 years, and there we went back over Tehran, Qazvin, Tabriz, Erzurum. All my life, the girl I married, Anna, was an ardent reader of Attar. Rabia was her saint. On a gravestone in Uppsala, there is written a line from Attar, Bashtayim Burbar. The last 10 years she was stricken by Alzheimer. 3 years ago I met Sigrid Kahle. I was 87 and she was 82. And she was familiar with these Sufi poets through her father, H.S. Nyberg, professor in Hebrew and Farsi. And he had in his teaching made use of Hermelin's translations because they were so faithful to the original. He wrote letters to the translator imprisoned in an asylum praising his genius. I lived with Sigrid Kahle to her death in cancer, 2013. Why did Erik Hermelin translate the Sufi poetry? His relatives had on false grounds been able to get him imprisoned in this lunatic asylum, St. Lars, in the city of Lund, in the southern part of Sweden. He was locked up for 35 years, up to his death in November 1944. He was not mad. On the contrary, he was super intelligent with always a sound judgment. The problem was that he had a mighty desire for strong drinks, and Johan Hermelin has told us about this. Under these circumstances, how could he bear this situation, being imprisoned? How did he react? Locked up for 35 years, his life in freedom took an end when he was 49 years old. Sometimes he flew into a rage. He called the superintendent medical officer, "You, the incarnation of stupidity." Once they found an axe in his bed, under the mattress. Sometimes he protested with total silence, not for a week, but for months. He didn't say a syllable. And when the condition became unbearable, he escaped. Once by way of a rope ladder that still is kept in the asylum, and he could be away for several weeks, wandering as a vagabond. And at last the police did find him and transport him back to his prison. During those 35 years, he escaped 20 times. He lived in the private section of the asylum, reserved for rich people. He had 2 rooms, one for the night, one for the day. As he was working, sitting with the window open summer as in winter, dressed in a ragged sheepskin coat and with a skull cap on his head. His appearance evokes the image of a dervish. It seemed to himself that he no longer sat in prison in this lunatic asylum, but was in a spiritual province of peace and happiness and safety. These Sufi poets had trust in God. They knew that God owns all of us and that Satan, Shaitan, who had tempted him to bad actions, already was judged and will lose the game.